Hey everyone, so today we're going to be looking at literacy and numeracy and how it's incorporated into the curriculum. This is for the Swinburne University class, Literacy and Numeracy in the Curriculum, codename EDU20022. So this class has been about how we understand literacy and numeracy, how it's used, and why it's so important for a student to understand it. So quickly before we get into anything else, I wanted to go over one more time what literacy and numeracy is or are. So these ideas encompass most of what a student will learn in their schooling life. Literacy being the ability to understand and comprehend things that we see, and numeracy being things like arithmetic, patterns, so on and so forth. At its core, literacy and numeracy are things that are ways of communication. Numbers, writing, understanding people talking. These are ways that which people can communicate with one another and also create the basis upon which we create things in life. So as I've listed here, literacy and numeracy are fundamental parts of the curriculum that extend beyond a student's schooling life and connect as a foundation for most skills outside of academics, leading them outside of schooling and why they will need to have these key skills going into the future. So here is a example of the pre-test we did, the test we did for the class. And I'll get into my overall score right after this, but this test was for us to gauge our ability and our own, how literate and numerate we really were. So this question here I found to be extremely good, not only because I got it wrong, but because it combines literacy and numeracy in a really interesting way. While the subject matter and the topic is numeric in terms of its numbers, statistics, it wants to know things, this question is shaped in the way of a literacy question. It's comprehension, it's do you understand what the question's asking you and everything. I actually got the question wrong as I stated, but I was happy about that, for something I'll lead in later with my pedagogy and my teaching stance. So overall now, this is my post-test reflection. So on this test, I scored 21 out of 32 possible marks. In these marks, most of the questions I got correct were in numeracy fields. So these questions that asked you maths, number, statistics. So a lot of probability and a lot of decimals were used here. So the literacy questions I didn't fare as well on. I failed 8 to 9, including the last question, which was, as most people have found, to be a bit of a trick question. I will leave that as well for today and talk about it a bit more later on if I do. So from this reflection, I was able to look at it and say, well, here, my strengths lie in numeracy. This is due to my heavy past in the field, but I won't touch on that too much more. That being said, I still have good basic literary skills, which are definitely important. So, as I was saying before, how I was happy I failed a question, this means that there's room for me to learn, which goes back to how I think as a teacher of everything is a learning opportunity. And at no point do you ever stop learning. So to get a question wrong isn't a bad thing at all. If anything, it's good because it's showing that you're still learning, you're adapting, there's more that you can see and understand. So following this, I looked at ways we could enhance literacy and numeracy in the English classroom as being one of my method areas. So as I've just touched over, my literacy marks were lower than that of my numeracy ones, if we were to separate the two. So to strengthen my own literacy, in terms of what I failed with, which was grammar, comprehension, and certain analysis questions, I think it's very much important to, as Goose, Doyle, and Geiger suggest, look at literacy, and where else is learned in the school. Because everything that is learned must be learned in multiple contexts. It goes on to repetition. So, and furthermore said by the National Research Council, skills that are learned in one situation can apply to new situations. So these two together, they're very important because it's how a student learns one thing early on in their life, takes that knowledge, and uses it later on. For instance, when I was younger, you learn how to spell, you learn how to read. That skill is, while the basis is learned when you're young, it's strengthened as you become older, and as such you use it everywhere in life. So here I've also said, so my confidence and numeracy skills can be utilised through poetry and rhythm. these are some of the things in English classes that are often forgotten, with English being a fairly dominant class for literacy in most people's eyes, unless you think about it enough. Poetry and rhythm in English and just sentence structure is beyond important to look at. And due to my skills in numeracy, I feel like I'll be able to teach this very well. This also pairs well with my scores in the land type, which we've all had to sit complete at one point or another. So with my weaknesses being in grammar though, in sentence structure, it gives me, being in an English classroom gives me a chance to extend my learning, strengthen my understanding. Again, going back to my teaching stance. So strategies around teaching English would be, for students who struggle with illiteracy or numeracy, you can give them, as I've said already, repetition. It's a fantastic way to get students to be thinking about what they're doing, and eventually, if they keep doing it enough, they'll get used to it, like riding a bike. So, another thing that's really important is the area with which you learn. So you want to set yourself up in a good zone of proximal development, Bronfenbrenner. You want to work with people who are strong. So people who are stronger areas than you. So if I'm sitting next to someone who's better at grammar than me, but I'm better at analysis, then we're going to help each other out, bring each other up to the same level, which is what we want to do. Use each other as ways to engage our learning and to enhance it. Something that I find very important is students need to be working at their own pace. Something that can happen in the classroom is, especially in Year 12 classrooms, being a high school teacher, the pace can be set quite high. You need to get through all this material in order for your exam. So I think it's very important for students to realise that while one person learns quickly, they might need to spend a bit more time on this, and then, while learning shouldn't be considered a race. So it's differentiation, looking at how different students learn. Another thing is gamifying English. So let's make it fun. An English class can be extremely engaging or not, depending on the student. So by having the idea of gamification used, having games, working with sentence structure prose, and even if it's just little tests, which I'll touch more on in this section. So this is media in the classroom. So literacy and numeracy in media are both heavily intertwined. In terms of numeracy, you have running times of students' films, editing students working with computer programs, and literacy is paramount due to the language used in these classes. Again, I would recommend for this class, ways to enhance it, is straight to using Bronfenbrenner's model. Setting up a zone of learning where students feel comfortable to talk to each other about their problems, use each other to strengthen their own understanding, and again, that looks back to my pedagogical stance. Strategies around this would be, if you wanted to enhance literacy, give the students a clear goal of what's happening. So give them class activities, give them a set of terms, media terms to use, such as editing, mise en scène, so on and so forth, and then give them a scene that it would match best up with, what's being used in this scene, what's being used in this scene. That way, it's a surface learning that the students can understand, and this is good for Year 7, 8, 9, early level students who are struggling with how to use the terms and what they mean. Then, as you grow older, you can use this task again, but giving them less information. Give the student a term and tell them which scene applies best, tell me why. Or vice versa, give the scene which idea or principle applies best to this. So, and then numeracy for this can also be, have a mini competition for people to work in groups. So have a photography competition, play with the resolution, how it's shot, the camera angles, and get students to work together, because it's going to work on their group building, everyone coming up at the same level, and you can also do some ability grouping. So who knows? So overall, from the results of my literacy test, I've decided that my literacy skills are strong and something I feel extremely confident with. That being said, even though my literacy skills need work, I'm still very comfortable with them as well. It just means that in both areas there's room to grow, which is above and beyond important. As we've already discussed, you never stop learning till the day you die. And I think that's something that I will stress to my students, is that even if you fail at once, it's not a bad thing. It's a chance to move forward, gain some understanding, and do better. And it's just the references we've decided today. Thank you for listening.